A couple games of each other as we continue the race towards playoffs. We see Contracts leading the charge as Golden Guardians head to the stage. Tough task for them today as they'll face off against Doublelift and the rest of Team Liquid in our first game of the day. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LCS Countdown, where we will test our league knowledge against the OG Stats Master. And then Crumbs and Mark will give us their top lane rankings until the timer reaches 0 and we jump into Champion Select. A reminder, though, if you're in the Detroit area, make sure you don't miss your chance to see the pros up close. Tickets for Summer Finals, presented by Rocket Mortgage, are on sale. So reserve your seat at the Little Caesars Arena on Saturday, August 24th and Sunday, August 25th. We're excited to announce as well, for the first time, Riot is partnering with State Farm to host the State Farm Cosplay Contest, where 5 talented cosplayers will be selected and flown out to experience Finals Weekend in Detroit. Cosplayers will compete for the grand prize, a round-trip ticket to the 2019 World Championship Finals for them and one friend, as well as a sweet cash prize of $5,000. Learn more at riot.com/finalscosplay. Now, though, let's check in on how the teams are progressing on the road to finals, brought to you by Rocket Mortgage. Currently, it's a crowded field with Team Liquid sitting alone in first place. TSM and CLG are splitting third with Golden Guardians, Clutch Gaming, and 100 Thieves, all within one game of each other as they hover around that all-important 6th seed. Today, though, I want to frame the conversation around what some of these teams sitting on the bubble need to do to shore up their gameplay in the final 2 weeks of the regular split. Let's start with Optic.
I think for me, when I look at Optic, they're a team that have a lot of strong points and some weak points. I think Dokla is someone that can really shore things up just a little bit more. We're doing a top lane tier list, don't want to give it away, but when I was digging into the stats, I was actually impressed with some of Dokla's numbers, and it speaks to the fact that he can play at a high level, and we saw that yesterday on that Aatrox performance. Had some really great plays, and I think the thing he struggles with more so is consistency. When he looks bad, he looks really bad, and when he looks good, he looks really good. And so getting him to be more consistent to help the team out will go a long way towards removing one of those problems that the team often has.
I will say it's pretty easy for a lot of the teams right now to look good against Echo Fox, but in particular, I think Dokla is the kind of player that reminds me of Wiggly in spring. I think that Wiggly in spring is not the Wiggly that is now in summer. It's a lot of confidence, a lot of does the team trust him and allow him to play to his maximum potential. And I think that if he is given a little bit more leeway and maybe a little bit extra push of confidence, I think he will shore up a lot of the weaknesses, because we hear from outspoken members of Optic that they think Dokla is really good. So I think that if the team trusts in him a little bit more, we're going to see those good
We've
results.
seen some improvement, but we're looking for consistency out of him. It'll aid the rest of the team in working towards whatever it is they have planned strategically. Next up, Golden Guardians. Let's talk about Froggen in the mid lane.
Yeah, so Froggen is pretty much the star of Golden Guardians so far, but unfortunately it hasn't translated into as many wins as you'd like to see for this team. Recently, they subbed out Deftly and Olay, even trading Deftly away to Cloud9 Academy, and they've been playing a lot around FBI and Huhi, to the point where yesterday they got a really good lead early on and were unable to close out the game. I think that if they shore up their play around the bottom lane, allow FBI and Huhi to be really aggressive, get those early snowball dragons, they're going to be able to be a much stronger team, especially if you include Froggen on these champions like Twisted Fate, doing a little bit more work towards roaming in the bottom lane and helping them out. They already have some crazy jungle participation there, but if they can actually close out games with that, I think this is a team that is definitely in playoffs.
We had some statistics around jungle proximity for the bot lane. Mark, I think you have those.
Yeah, it was around 20%. So
that's
FBI
crazy high.
That is crazy high for a bot laner. The only people usually around 20% are mid laners. It's unheard of, as far as I'm aware, to have a 20% jungle proximity in the bot lane. So it does speak to how much they are trying to play through FBI and how they did get a really large lead. They just need to get a little bit about closing it out.
They got to to refine that play style that they've seemed to index into. Lastly, let's talk about 100 Thieves. They've been on a surge so far here in the mid-split after a rough start with Amazing in the lineup.
Yeah, but I'm really concerned about their long-term future now that people are starting to adapt to the changes ever since Ryu has come in with Fake God. And you heard in Sven's interview yesterday after C9 beat them that he said, well, they only go bot lane. So even though Licorice, our star player, is back in the lineup, I knew I never needed to go top. I'll leave him 1v1 to solo out Fake God, because I know Amazing's never going up there. So I just need to stop Amazing in the bot side. And it gets this really telegraphed play style So I do think they need to spend a little bit more time and effort on other places around the map. Even though, yes, Bang is your main carry and you want to make sure it gets ahead, it's just a little too straightforward of a game plan right now, and teams are starting to key into that.
Well, we'll see if those teams can make some moves after our games today. First up on the Rift, it's Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid. And in our third match, Optic will look to solidify their playoff position when they battle TSM. Then, of course, on LCS cooldown, Mike Young and Lorlo will join Freak and Jap to explain top lane tactics and prove who's the best Nidalee in North America. If we think back on the spring split, though, CounterLogic Gaming was not one of the teams at the forefront of many people's minds as a squad that could break into the top 3. Ahead of this week's games, though, I was able to visit the CLG training facility, and I started by asking the director of esports, Matt Nusha, what is behind this transformation?
Side of the physical structure, which is easy for us to identify, like what are the other kind of levers that you were pulling, you know, to lend that support and ultimately level the company up?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a couple things. I would say on the coaching staff, that was like the most blatantly obvious for me.
Okay.
So I came from traditional sports, and the way that coaches are used there and how we identify coaches looks very different than esports. Esports, it's getting better, but you know, it still kind of defaults to a strategist that has a head coach title. While that is good, there's a lot more than just strategy when it comes to a head coach.
When specifically building your coaching staff, what were you looking at, and how did you go about landing on Irene and Weldon?
You essentially take kids from their homes and you put them in a pro environment, which is what we don't see in traditional sports, right? We see a progression through high school, college, and then to the pro level. And so that's what we began to look at in evaluating the talent available to us was who understands that this is a process, that development is important outside of these areas that actually does impact competitive, right? How do you get somebody to have a professional mindset? How do you have somebody that can manage the noise around the pro space? And so when we brought in Weldon's background is similar to mine. It was a natural fit, one, but we had a lot of conversations where he said, this is what I'm looking for, and I smiled and I said, this is what we do, and this is what we are also looking for, and so it was a really good fit.
Sweet.
And so when it came to Irene, we were looking purely for the strategist, whereas Weldon's the head coach and oversees the macro and the vision of the direction of the team. And so for Irene, we ran a lot of strategic coaches through trial periods, and we actually had them do VOD reviews with our players and getting player feedback on what did they learn, was anything learned, was anything new, was insightful, and so that way we could get a flavor of what it would be like to actually work with this person day to day.
Did that go well? Well, clearly he got hired. But how well did it go?
So really well. All the players came back and they essentially said that this is absolutely the guy, and that we actually learned something new. And that
within that one session?
Correct.
That's amazing. We just had MSI and Rift Rivals where G2 comes in, impresses everybody with kind of wild picks, and I think illustrated to the world that there are other ways to play League of Legends.
It's kind of funny because I think when we started screaming the U teams, they definitely were more willing to like just put whatever is good versus whatever and put it anywhere on the map, you know, like they'd put any champion mid lane, any champion top lane, any champion.
As long as the matchup
as long as the matchup was favorable.
Is this new meta causing you guys to have more interaction with each other around the way things go and which champions ultimately are going to learn and practice?
Well, definitely. I'm trying to help as much as I can with my knowledge. If like there's like a certain mage beginning play top lane, I will try to tell him like which are the aspects which you can exploit, and even if he maybe doesn't play the mages I would counter this mage, I can tell him like, okay, like this is one of his weaknesses, like how about this champion?
Let's say that Power Viva wants to play Malphite mid next week, right? That you just have decided that this is something you think is valuable to the team. What's the process here at CLG for you to ultimately get to play Malphite mid?
So I would probably try to tell him like, oh, this is the meta pick right now, like everyone's gonna play Kiana, and then Malphite is the ultimate counter pick.
Okay.
I can get parity on most waves, we can use it for maybe early dragon fights.
Talk to me about the process of bringing a new bot lane duo like into the fold for LCS.
I guess every 2 weeks there's a patch, so that's where a lot of changes happen.
Right.
Usually on those patch changes is when you're like, hey, I'm gonna try this bot lane, and then maybe you get suggestions like, it's good with this stuff, or we need heavy AD champs if we're gonna have brand bottom lane, stuff like that. And then you just kind of try it in scrims, and you figure out more and more as you play more, and then it just kind of figures itself out almost.
CLG is now competitive at the top of the table. It's easiest for us to, from a results-based perspective, say, you're good now.
Yep.
When did you guys feel that like all of the work you'd done was actually starting to pay off and that the results would follow?
So we actually did know in spring. And the reason why I can say that, and I think the biggest difference this year, is the coaching staff is so good at identifying what our problems are and communicating that to management that it makes my job a lot easier. But we're very clear on where our deficiencies are and where our strengths are. And so we knew that, and so we knew all we have to do is we solve for this, which we did, and we're gonna turn the corner.
What do you think is the next big issue to tackle?
I would say probably the most immediate one is probably around player injuries. So there's a couple of things we do. So we contract with a yoga instructor. So Monday mornings, the guys are doing yoga. We also have a massage therapist that comes in and also addresses like their pain points. We contract physical therapists as needed. We try to do preventive management, so that way we're not only contacting them when there's an issue that's arising.
Right. That's awesome. I love to hear that. It's definitely something we gotta solve. So,
Cool.
Way to lead the charge. All right.
Welcome back to the LCS Countdown, where we're closing in on Game 1 of the day. It's time, though, to see if Jat's time away has made him any kinder, more gentle, dare I say, easier as a stats master?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that these are going to be easier questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hit me with your first lot.
Literally,
what?
you guys have spent, like the whole day looking at top lane stats?
Yeah,
Trying
let's
to
go with the
figure
whole
out-
day.
Everything is top lane related.
All right.
All three of them are
Lob us
Alright.
the
Champions.
first
We're gonna mess it
softball
up.
question, please.
I think the first one might be the hardest because
oh boy.
it is outside of just LCS.
Oh.
So this champion is the most picked top lane champion in the LPL summer split, but the 13th most picked champion in the LCS summer split. So most picked in LPL, 13th most in LCS. And you can see the number of picks there on the graphic. 38 in the LPL, 3 games. in
I've
the
got a
LCS.
guess. I've got a guess.
What's your guess?
My guess is Rumble, because it's only
Oh, because
Huni.
only Huni.
But Hooney's played more than 3, so that's
Yeah.
not right. He's
Yeah,
played
yeah,
a
yeah.
ton of Rumble games,
He's played at least 4,
right?
Yeah.
So
I'm probably throwing
So it
you off.
can't
You
be
should, you
Rumble.
should stick to your guns. Don't listen to
I'm
me.
gonna stick to my guns. I'm sticking to it.
we've had a ton of Aatrox.
I feel like we haven't seen any Aurelia.
I only watched.
Oh
like, the
yeah, right.
top
Aurelia
end.
is maybe once or twice in the top
It's mostly
lane.
mids.
There's only been 2 Riven games, so that isn't quite.
No, someone
correct,
else played
right?
a Riven game.
Ooh, that would be.
Was it
So I'll go Riven. I'll go Riven just
I'll go-
because the
I'll go-
3
I'll go Aurelia.
three might
Rumble.
line up.
You're all wrong. It's Renekton.
Oh, that
Starts with an R.
I knew
I was
I
the
didn't play.
closest.
Yeah.
Point for me.
I knew that.
Rumble.
Point for me.
3
Rumble.
LCS
It starts
picks.
with R.
I actually knew that one.
Oh, Riven I is closer
Yeah,
to
you
E
know it
than
now.
you is. So I still win.
Knew it.
I still
Okay.
win, Crumb.
Question 2 is LCS top laners kills per game. Who has the most in the top lane for kills per game?
Easy. This is easy.
This-
This one.
can you get
remember
this one?
What is it?
I'm not gonna help you guys. I'll say
All right, he
last.
says he knows. He wants to prove it.
Most kills
Per game.
I'll say it. We'll get it right together.
Is it a candy?
I actually don't know if it's correct anymore.
What are you talking about? Is it a candy? Oh, licorice? You're just saying you're gonna.
I'm trying to get a hint out of it.
Well, so Licorice has played less games, right? And so.
But he has a lot.
He does have a lot of kills, but that's my only concern is that he's played a
It's
few
not
less
impact.
games.
It's not
It's not impact.
Actually,
but
now I'm getting
I
confused
could see
'cause
it being
I'm getting
like
kills at
Haunts
15.
or-
Kills
No, because Hans
No.
is very inactive with his team.
So here's what I know.
Impact
He-
or-
he has the most
or
kills.
Licorice.
He had the most kills before he got subbed out. So his
Licorice.
kills
Let's go Licorice then.
Licorice.
I think it might be Kumo.
still does.
It might be Kumo because he actually had a ton.
Oh,
guess?
no,
I'm
let's go Licorice. Wait,
Licorice.
was there a buried entry on like number
Licorice?
of games played?
Licorice.
Yeah, Licorice.
Licorice.
Kumo.
Kumo.
Wait, most
Licorice is number 2.
kills?
Per
Licorice-
game.
Yeah, I knew it.
Oh,
Okay.
per
Times.
game.
Listed all the way
Okay,
through.
okay.
I-
Kills
yeah.
per game.
Per
He got us on the
game.
kills per
The
game.
Top lane
right.
jungle
4
or
and a half.
C9. Just
That's totally
smash.
fair. But hey, the C9 top laners are crushing
And
it.
there's no restrictions on any of these questions, by the way.
Oh, good.
Question 3. Deaths at 15.
Huni.
Who has the least?
Oh, the least. I just assumed the question was
Yeah.
Or
Huni.
the fewest.
I just did. I really did. I assumed.
A hint, this player also has the highest KDA at 15 for top laners. So it's not that they just don't die, they're also going to
Here's the problem. I looked at stats exclusively at 10.
Not
so
really.
I
Not
don't really
really,
know.
You can extrapolate. right?
No, because it's funny how different the stats
Yeah.
become over those 5 minutes.
Yeah. I like 15 minutes because that's a clear.
Hey, not
mid-game.
Rune, Huni, Dokla, not
Least deaths.
Yeah.
So it might be.
You could-
Viper.
I think it's Hanser. I think it's Hanser
Might
or
be
Viper.
I think it's Hanser.
I think it's Hanser. Hanser's pretty in, like,
I'll-
there's not a whole
I
lot.
like, because it's KDA, right?
No.
Yeah, it's
death.
deaths. He also said also as high as KDA.
Yeah.
Also has high skills. Yeah, I'm gonna go Hanser.
Yeah, there are a couple players that have the same
I
number of
said
deaths.
Viper.
Viper. Mark is 2 out of
Nice,
3.
dude.
I actually did the stats
And
homework
then
this week.
pretends he knew the first one as well.
Give me the
but,
robot back. Give me the robot
sure.
back.
Yeah, these were easier.
They were easier.
Yeah,
We
congratulations.
studied
Mark.
the wrong.
He gave hints.
we
Wait,
really
I didn't
for it.
study. That's your guys' job.
I got
You're
you
the ones
right.
who have to make the list. I just-
66% is passing, right? That's a D minus.
That's
but I,
a solid
it's not-
D
That's
minus.
I mean, that's like a C in Canada school.
In
Let's go
Canada,
Canada.
Still failing though.
All right, so you successfully passed Canada school. Congratulations, Mark. Keeping with the theme of top laners, though, once again, we are going to see how Mark and Crumbs stack rank the LCS pros. But first, to set the stage, let's go ahead and look at some of the qualities that separate good top laners from great ones. So, Mark, let's start with you. What are you looking at when evaluating a top laner?
A big part of top lane is because it's such an isolated position, when someone gets extra help from a jungler or something like that, it actually impacts the rest of the map a lot more than, say, if you swing by mid or bot lane. So when someone uses resources, how big of a reward are they getting it? And a lot of times you hear people talk about strong side versus weak side. That's both out of game in the draft, what you're picking, does it work well in multiple comps, can it play with help or without? And then also in-game, how much actual jungle attention are you getting? Those are the two things I think is really important for a top laner.
Okay.
And you can actually use stats for that. We have jungle participation, but I like to look at a lot of the stats for the laning phase. So we're looking at gold differential, CS differential, XP differential, and then you have how many of the deaths do they get? Are they first blood? And even more so, there is an intangible element to the top lane that we are not going to be able to track, and that's the teleport usage. How well do you use your teleport? Whether do you need to use it to get back to the lane? Do you use it to affect the bottom lane, around the map? So that's one of the things that we have to look at the eye test, but for the most part, I think we have a pretty good criteria for the top lane.
Jat, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with most of your criteria. One thing I want to kind of re-emphasize is I think sometimes players get too much credit for playing weak side. It's definitely a skill, but I'm more willing to give credit to the person who's actually winning the game and impacting the victory. If even just looking at a solo queue game, if I know the top laner is the best player in the game, I'm going to gank for him. That doesn't make him somehow worse, right? Like we see a
Right.
top laner who pops off like, well, his jungler's always up there. Why do you think he's always up there? Because you can actually win with this player. So if a top laner is able to get ganked for and drive to victory, like Licorice, I would rank that very highly.
Okay, fair enough. All right, we're going to take a
Spoilers.
quick break, so we'll meet us back here in just a couple of minutes to see how they stack rank the pros. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to the LCS Countdown, where we're narrowing in towards game one of the day, Golden Guardians versus Team Liquid. Today, though, we continue our look at the LCS role rankings with the top lane. Before the break, we talked about what aspects you see as most important to this role. And so those in mind, let's go ahead and compare your lists.
Ladies and gentlemen, I
Boom!
give you the dumbest list of all time.
The dumbest list. No, there's some interesting stuff here. Immediately, what jumps out to me is, of course, that you guys do align across the top, well, I guess the top four with Broken Blade, but I particularly want to hone in on that top three because we have Impact topping the table over here, Licorice over there. Let's start with Licorice, though. Mark, defend that.
I kind of agree with what Jat was saying at the very end, where he's talking about how you can play through them and actually win the game. Licorice stomps in almost every laning category. He's top 2 in all of them. He also gets the most kills. He has the highest forward percentage, some of the biggest gold differentials. He's been injured a little bit, so he hasn't quite been there in as many games as some of the other guys on this list, but dollar for dollar, pound for pound, like he does more work in the top lane. And yes, he does use a fair amount of resources in terms of draft and in-game, but he almost always delivers for what you're putting into him.
I think a crazy stat for Licorice is his forward percentage. Now, if you were to divide the lane up right down the middle where the creeps meet, he has a forward percentage of over 50%, which means he's spending over half the laning phase in the other side, and that just applies so much pressure.
Yeah.
That means he's really putting the work in the top lane, and that's a great quality of top
Yet, in the
laner.
face of that,
That's right.
you went ahead and threw Impact above him in the standings, so why is that?
Well, to me, Impact is a player that is just so consistent, but he's not consistent in the sense that he's going to always deliver. He kind of feels like he plays however he wants at all times. And if he just randomly decides, you know what, today I'm just going to carry, he seems to do that. And his teleport usage in particular is one of the things that I really like about Impact out of all of my other top laners. His ability to use TP to help the bottom lane, to help out another lane, or even just teleport to a ward to let your jungler get a scuttle is really valuable for me. I think the teleports are just so important for top laners that I have to favor him over it.
May I suggest the word reliability?
Reliability,
then, right?
yes.
Because you can rely on whatever output you need from him. It's not always the carry potential maybe that Licorice shows, but he will give you what you're looking for. How about you, Mark? What are the reasons why Impact falls into number 2 behind Licorice, or maybe you don't index into those things that Crumbs
I mean,
like
here's the
Licorice,
thing.
right?
Yeah, the thing is, like, what Crumbs is saying about, like, playing to the level of his opponents is something I think Impact does a little too often in regular season. Come playoffs and international, suddenly he's so good out of nowhere, when in reality, I think it's what Crumbs is talking about, where it's about how much effort he's putting into that particular game. And so, like, in terms of summer split performance...
He's number 2.
He's number 2, but I love his performances in, playoffs and international stage.
Fair enough. Then let's talk about number 3, because Hanser, you both align, top 3 here, but he's on a team that currently sits in 6, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy there.
This man is the most left-alone top laner we have. He really gets little to no attention, yet his laning stats are impeccable. He's always ahead in experience, gold, CS, just doing so much on his own. Unfortunately, it's not translating to as many wins as you'd like to see. So to me, the fact that he's left alone so often and still manages to succeed is a really good stat. However, if you compare it to who he's left up against, okay, maybe not so much, but it's just a matter of you got to give the guy credit for what he's doing, working with so little.
Doing a lot with a little.
And it shines a light on the rest of them. Like we're talking about FBI having 20% jungle proximity. That's because Hanser doesn't need any to still win his lane. And then it becomes, well, why isn't the team winning? And it's hard to be like, oh, the guy with those impeccable stats without any help is the problem.
All right, fair enough. Let's move down the list. We're going to jump down to Ruin. I want to talk about him because CLG is a totally different team from where they were in spring. And to a degree, he was the major change, right, between the two splits. But I think a lot of times when we talk about CLG's success, we are pointing towards Wiggly. So I kind of want to get a barometer for how good Ruin actually is.
He's a bit of an X factor because statistically, he's actually second in most death. It's just one behind Huni, which is something that you don't really want to compete for this stat. Yet he continues to work very well with the team, right? He has good synergies with Wiggly, and when it comes to team play, he works well, whether it's peeling for a Baron, whether it's making a teleport to the bottom lane and helping out Bio and Stixxay. So the team play and synergy aspect for Ruin, to me, is what aligns him in the top 5 or top 6 in Mark's ranking. And even yesterday, we were speaking to Broken Blade, and he ranks him as one of the most top-tier top laners we have in the league.
Yeah, I think it's hard to put a number on. Stats are pretty pedestrian, but then you can't remember any of those deaths. It's not like, oh, he has a lot of deaths, but like, which one cost them the game? I can't really tell you. So that's why it's hard to think about how good or bad he is.
So then let's talk about the deaths leader in Huni, because I do think, to your point that you just made, Mark, sometimes we do see a death from Huni and we go, that may have been game losing, but in general, oh, how far this man has fallen from where we would have ranked him a couple years ago.
Well, it's not just the number of deaths, it's the other resources he's getting too. He plays Rumble and Cassio, not super common champions in the current meta. It seems to put his team out in draft to have to do weird things, which they seem down to do, but then he also picks up the most of Lyra's time. He has the most jungle proximity of any top laner playing, and he doesn't really get great results for it. So, we talk about strong side players getting results, but not, they are getting help, and then weak side players not getting help. He gets help and doesn't quite deliver, which is why he's fallen pretty far, but he still has a lot of skill and still has a fair amount of other good stats as well.
I think the best example is yesterday when they were up against Team Liquid, and then Lyra sticks around in the brush, waiting to look for the gank, and then they're missed time, so then they end up going a tower dive that gets fumbled. So that adds so much time to Lyra's time spent in the top lane, yet the result was just terrible because it didn't net you what you were looking for. So it commits so many resources, but the lack of synergy does not translate it to anything that wins you the game.
Just a point of clarity, I know some people might be looking at Lorlo at the bottom of the list and say, hey, what about solo? Basically, we decided to look at current starters. Otherwise, you'd be making,
14.
Right, a 14-person list. You'd be looking at someday and trying to figure out where he goes, and we haven't necessarily seen him on the LCS stage in quite some time. So Lorlo takes the spot of solo simply because he occupies solidifies the starting position. 1 minute to go before the game start. Let's go ahead and take a look at predictions real quick.
Oh boy.
And there's only one difference. Comes
Yeah.
from that third game of the day. Putting your
crumbs.
faith in Optic
That's right.
over TSM.
That's
Why
right.
is
so
that?
I want to make moves to get ahead in these prediction games. First of
Okay.
all, I'm not trying to go even. I'm trying to win this.
I like it.
So, Optic yesterday just got rid of their 0-2 slump. And TSM was very sad about their loss. It was very obvious that they struggled to win against Golden Guardians. So, to me, the fact that they lost the bottom lane and then Optic did really well in the bottom lane matchup might speak to me that Arrow and Big could pop off and start snowballing through that matchup. So, I think that if Optic has the same game plan, or at least concise game plan that they had against Echo Fox yesterday, I think that this could be a win for them.
What's the key for TSM?
You're not Echo Fox. There you go. That's why they won't move top.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. TSM is not Echo Fox. And with that, we are going to toss it out to the Battle Arena for the first game of the day.
Not Echo Fox.
Thank you very much, Dash. Here we are for the first game of Sunday's